What started as a normal late-night interview ended with a walkout that shocked millions. Karoline Leavitt didn't just clash with Stephen Colbert. She left the stage in front of a stunned live audience. Was it courage, a stunt, or a sign of how divided we really are? Let's break it down. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. It started like any other night on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. But within minutes, the atmosphere turned electric. The show's usual rhythm was in place, a cheerful band playing in the background, Colbert cracking his signature mix of political jokes and satire, and the crowd eagerly awaiting the next big guest. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but behind the bright lights and polished smiles, a moment was brewing that no one, neither the audience nor the production crew, could have predicted. Enter Karoline Leavitt. At just 26 years old, she's already become one of the most talked-about rising stars in conservative politics. A former Trump White House staffer and a prominent Republican strategist, Leavitt has earned a reputation for being fearless, unapologetic, and ready to go head-to-head with anyone who challenges her beliefs. And tonight, she was about to put that reputation to the test. Dressed in a striking hot pink suit, she took her seat across from Colbert, poised and confident. The two exchanged polite greetings. There was laughter, a bit of friendly banter, and Colbert, true to his style, snuck in a few light jabs about the GOP and Trump world. Leavitt, clearly anticipating the tone, smiled and rolled with it. The audience chuckled. Everything seemed under control. But then it shifted. As Colbert moved into more pointed questions, particularly about Trump's ongoing legal troubles, the January 6th hearings, and the current state of the Republican Party, the tone changed fast. What started as a casual chat morphed into something much sharper. Colbert asked, "How do you defend a party that continues to back a man facing multiple indictments and investigations?" Leavitt didn't hesitate. "Stephen, maybe if the mainstream media, including shows like this one, spent half as much time talking about inflation, the border crisis, or the struggles of everyday Americans, instead of obsessing over Donald Trump, we'd all be a little better off." The room went quiet. Then, a mix of cheers and groans rippled through the crowd. Colbert raised an eyebrow, smiled wryly, and leaned forward. "So you're saying we should just ignore what many see as a threat to democracy?" That's when it became clear. This wasn't going to be a typical interview. This was turning into a showdown. Karoline, clearly unshaken, fired back. "What I'm saying is that Americans are tired of being told what to think by Hollywood and the liberal media. They want their problems addressed, not just political theater." What followed was a volley of verbal punches. Colbert accused her of deflecting. She accused him of bias. He questioned her party's credibility. She questioned his role as a comedian who pretends to be a journalist. By now, the tension in the studio was undeniable. The conversation wasn't just heated, it was personal. Each word was sharper than the last. The audience, used to light-hearted political pokes, was suddenly watching something much more raw and unpredictable. Then came the moment no one saw coming. When Colbert interrupted her mid-sentence to say, "You're just repeating MAGA talking points," Karoline paused, leaned back slightly, and said firmly, "Stephen, if you invited me here just to mock me, I'm not playing along. I came here to speak, not be shouted over." The crowd murmured. Colbert, perhaps trying to regain control of the segment, said half-jokingly, "No one's forcing you to stay." Without missing a beat, Karoline calmly removed her microphone, stood up, and said, "Then I won't." And, just like that, she walked off. The studio gasped. Colbert sat still, clearly caught off guard. The camera lingered just a second too long on the empty chair she had left behind. What had just happened wasn't scripted, it wasn't planned, and it wasn't something viewers would forget anytime soon. In the age of viral clips and instant online reactions, this moment was already racing through the internet like wildfire. People rushed to social media, scrambling for clips, forming opinions and picking sides. Some praised Karoline for standing her ground. Others said she was running away from tough questions. But one thing was certain. This was no ordinary night on late-night television. It was a cultural flashpoint, a moment where politics, entertainment, and raw emotion collided in front of millions. A moment that reminded everyone watching that when you put two strong personalities on opposite ends of the political spectrum in one room, anything can happen. And on that night, it did. Karoline Leavitt, known for her sharp political commentary and rising influence in conservative circles, wasn't just another guest on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. She was a statement. A former Trump White House staffer, congressional candidate, and firebrand political strategist, Leavitt is part of a new generation of Republican voices unafraid to go toe-to-toe with legacy media. Her invitation to the show was seen by many as a bold move on both sides. Some believed Colbert was setting the stage for another humorous takedown of MAGA talking points. Others thought Karoline would use the platform to outshine her critics. On live TV, when she stepped onto the set in a bright hot pink suit, it was clear she didn't come to blend in. Her posture was calm, her expression measured. She greeted Colbert with a polite handshake, settled into her chair, and waited for the game to begin. And it did. Stephen Colbert, known for his razor-sharp wit and politically charged humor, kicked things off in classic fashion. He cracked a few jokes about GOP campaign slogans, made light of recent Republican missteps, and tossed in a playful jab about Trump's truth-telling on social media. The crowd laughed, and for a moment, so did Karoline. She smiled, nodded, and responded to his first few questions with grace and professionalism. Despite being in what many would consider hostile territory, she remained composed. She clearly knew what to expect, and she was ready. But it didn't take long for the tone to shift. Colbert, shifting gears from comedy to confrontation, leaned in with a more serious question. So, Karoline, how do you explain continuing to support a candidate who's facing multiple investigations and indictments? Doesn't that raise ethical concerns about the direction of your party? The room went quiet. The playful banter had ended. Now it was time for real answers. Karoline's expression tightened ever so slightly. She paused, not because she didn't have a response, but because she wanted the room to hear her next words clearly. She looked Colbert straight in the eye and replied, "Stephen, maybe if the media spent half as much time covering inflation, the crisis at the southern border, or the cost of groceries, as they do chasing after Donald Trump, Americans wouldn't be struggling to pay their rent." Boom. The crowd gasped, some cheered, others murmured in disapproval, and for a brief moment, the air in the studio became noticeably heavier. Colbert raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting such a direct hit. This wasn't a carefully rehearsed talking point. This was a well-timed counterpunch aimed straight at the credibility of media narratives, including his own. Rather than backing down, Karoline doubled down. She went on to say, "You and many others in the media want to talk about Trump 24/7, but Americans, real Americans, are worried about how they're going to afford their next meal, fill up their gas tanks, or keep their small businesses alive. That's what I'm here to talk about." Colbert, a seasoned performer and quick thinker, smiled and attempted to regain control. "Well, Karoline, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can care about democracy and rising grocery bills." But Karoline wasn't giving him an inch. "Then why don't you? Why is it that every time I turn on a news channel or watch a late-night show, the only thing being covered is what Trump tweeted or what he said 3 years ago?" The tension was now undeniable. What had begun as an interview had now evolved into a full-blown debate. There was no laughter, no cue. Cards. Just two people with clashing ideologies, standing their ground, live in front of millions. The audience looked on, captivated. Some applauded Karoline's bravery, others silently sided with Colbert. But no one could deny the power of the moment. This wasn't just television, It was a culture clash unfolding in real time. For Leavitt, it was an opportunity to show that conservative voices weren't afraid of liberal platforms. For Colbert, it was a chance to challenge rising GOP stars on their home turf. And for the audience, both in the studio and online, it was a front-row seat to the kind of raw, unfiltered political confrontation rarely seen on late-night TV. By the time the next question came, the mood had shifted permanently. The gloves were off, and the interview was no longer about sound bites or headlines. It was about two Americas staring each other down through the lens of one unforgettable conversation. The conversation quickly turned into a verbal tug-of-war, tense, unscripted, and impossible to ignore. Karoline Leavitt, sitting across from Stephen Colbert under the bright studio lights, was no longer smiling. The atmosphere had shifted completely. What started as a bold but respectful exchange had now transformed into a fiery clash of ideologies, and neither side was backing down. Colbert leaned in, his tone growing more pointed. "Do you genuinely believe," he asked, "that Donald Trump is the victim of some kind of media witch hunt? Even with all the indictments, lawsuits, and investigations, are you seriously saying this is all just fake?" The audience held its breath. Karoline didn't hesitate. Her voice was calm but unwavering. "You know what's a real witch hunt?" she said. "What's happening to middle-class Americans under this administration? That's the story no one in your circles wants to tell." Boom! Another direct hit. The crowd exploded, some cheering loudly in support, others booing just as passionately. It wasn't just a TV interview anymore. It had become a battleground between two Americas, live and unfiltered. Colbert raised his hands, trying to settle the room. He smirked, clearly amused, but also trying to regain control of the moment. "Come on, Karoline," he said with a slight laugh. "It's a little hard to take that seriously when you're dodging basic facts and just parroting MAGA talking points." That was it. Karoline's expression hardened. She leaned forward, her voice sharp and direct. "Stephen, you invited me. Here for a conversation, not a lecture. If you're not interested in hearing a different point of view, maybe I should go." Silence. For the first time that night, the room went still. The laughter stopped. The shouting faded. Even Colbert paused, unsure whether to respond with another joke or an olive branch. Instead, he tried to play it cool. "No one's stopping. You, Karoline," he said, with a shrug and a tight smile. "You're free to leave any time." But even he didn't expect what happened next. Karoline calmly removed her microphone. There was no anger in her face, only conviction. Without saying another word, she stood up, straightened her jacket, and walked off the set. Just like that. The audience was frozen. Some gasped, others looked around, unsure if it was real or part of some pre-planned bit. But it wasn't staged. There was no punchline, no music cue, no commercial break to smooth over the chaos. Karoline Leavitt had just walked off live television, on one of the most watched late-night shows in America. Colbert sat at his desk, momentarily speechless. For a few seconds, he stared at the empty chair across from him, as if trying to process what had just happened. Then he turned to the audience and attempted to inject some humor into the moment. "Well," he said, "that was something." But the crowd's reaction wasn't laughter, it was shock. On social media, the moment exploded instantly. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were being shared, dissected, and debated. The hashtags #Leavitt Walkout and the Colbert Clash were trending. Some viewers hailed Karoline as a hero for standing her ground. Others criticized her for storming off instead of engaging in dialogue. But no matter where people stood politically, one thing was crystal clear. This was one of the most unforgettable moments in late-night television history. For Karoline's supporters, the walk-off symbolized strength and defiance, proof that conservative voices could push back even in the most unfriendly environments. For critics, it was seen as evasion, an unwillingness to face hard questions without retreating. And for Colbert, it was a moment of both triumph and vulnerability. He had challenged a rising conservative star, and she had left his stage, but not without delivering her message to millions. What makes this moment even more remarkable is what it represents in today's divided media landscape. It wasn't just about two people disagreeing. It was about two entire worldviews colliding in real time. It exposed the deep frustration many Americans feel, on both sides, about being heard, respected, and represented in the national conversation. Karoline Leavitt didn't just leave a TV set that night. She left a message that said, "We're not here to be talked down to. We're here to be heard." Whether you loved it or hated it, agreed or disagreed, one thing's for sure. This was more than just a walk-off. It was a moment of political theater that will be remembered and replayed for years to come. Within minutes of Karoline Leavitt's dramatic walkout, the internet exploded. Clips of the moment flooded across every major platform: Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, even Facebook. Screenshots of her expression, slow-motion edits of her removing her mic, and side-by-side reactions from Colbert and the audience quickly became viral content. News channels scrambled to replay the footage, offering instant analysis as the incident dominated headlines. This wasn't just a trending moment, it was a media earthquake. The hashtag #CarolineWalksOut hit #1 on X, formerly Twitter, within the hour. The video racked up millions of views before midnight, with dozens of spin-off hashtags and reaction memes following close behind. Overnight, Karoline Leavitt, already known in political circles, became a household name. And then came the opinions. Social media turned into a virtual battleground, with users split right down the middle. On one side, supporters praised Karoline's walkout as bold and necessary. "She didn't storm out. She stood up for herself," one user wrote. Another posted, "Finally, someone calls out Colbert to his face. Enough with the one-sided preaching." Conservative commentators jumped in, many celebrating the moment as a powerful stand against liberal media bias. Several right-wing pundits called it the best thing they'd seen on television in years. One clip from a podcast went viral saying, "This was a mic drop moment for Karoline. She didn't lose her temper. She walked away with dignity when it became clear she wasn't being heard." On the flip side, critics of Leavitt were equally vocal. "She walked out because she didn't want to answer real questions," one viewer tweeted. Another wrote, "This was a PR stunt, pure and simple. You don't go on the Late Show expecting a tea party." Colbert's fans rallied around him. Some pointed out that his questions, while tough, were valid, and that any serious political figure should be able to handle pushback. Others argued that Karoline was trying to score viral points, not engage in dialogue. Even celebrities weighed in. A few Hollywood actors praised Colbert for staying composed. Meanwhile, a country music star retweeted the walkout clip with the caption, "That's how you walk when you're done taking crap from the elites." Then came the politicians. A handful of Republican lawmakers, including some Trump allies, publicly praised Karoline. One tweeted, "That's what courage looks like. She walked into enemy territory and didn't flinch." Several conservative media outlets echoed the sentiment, calling it a watershed moment in the fight against what they described as late-night political propaganda. On the other side, liberal commentators used the moment to highlight what they saw as a troubling trend: conservative figures appearing in liberal media spaces only to stir controversy or flee from real scrutiny. But regardless of the politics, everyone agreed on one thing: something big had just happened. Late-night television, once seen as a space for comedy, satire, and light political pokes, had just hosted a full-blown ideological standoff. And this time, it didn't end in a punchline. There were no laughs, no witty closer. Just a walk-off that echoed across every major cultural platform. Media analysts jumped on the story, debating what it meant for the future of political discourse. Some argued that this was the natural outcome of putting polarizing figures into an adversarial setting. Others said it reflected something deeper, that we've moved so far apart in our national conversation that even sharing a stage has become combustible. Meanwhile, YouTubers, TikTok creators, and content commentators churned out videos reacting to the moment. Some slowed the footage down, dissecting every facial expression and gesture. Others spliced the walkout with music, dramatic edits, and over-the-top voiceovers. Karoline herself tweeted the next morning, "I came to speak, not be silenced. America is tired of the double standards." The post received hundreds of thousands of likes and retweets within hours. Colbert didn't directly address the walkout on social media, but later in the week, he made a brief mention of it in his monologue. "We had a guest walk out the other night. I guess she thought it was a revolving door." The crowd laughed, but the tension lingered, because this wasn't just a walk-off, it was a cultural flashpoint. In just a few minutes of live television, Karoline Leavitt had ignited a nationwide debate about free speech, political bias, and the purpose of media platforms. Was it performance or protest, courage or cowardice, a genuine stand or a calculated move? The answers depend on where you stand politically, but the impact? Undeniable. Whether you agreed with her or not, Karoline's walkout changed the conversation and reminded everyone watching that in today's America, even a late-night talk show can become a national battlefield. In today's polarized climate, this explosive moment between Karoline Leavitt and Stephen Colbert wasn't just about politics. It was a spotlight on the fragile state of civil discourse in America. What happened on that late-night stage went far beyond two people disagreeing on policy. It became a flashpoint for how divided we've become and how challenging real conversations have turned out to be in a world where every word is dissected, every silence analyzed, and every disagreement turned into viral content. Karoline's walkout was a shock, but in the aftermath, the question wasn't just, why did she leave? It was, what does this moment really mean? Her team, not surprisingly, responded quickly. In a statement released the next morning, they clarified her actions and defended her choice to walk away. Karoline went on the show in good faith to have an honest discussion, the statement read. She wasn't there to be insulted, mocked, or used as a political punching bag. For her supporters, that message hit home. They saw her not as someone running from the conversation, but as someone taking a stand against a platform they believed was designed to tear her down. Colbert, for his part, didn't give a direct response. He didn't apologize, and he didn't double down. Instead, during his next monologue, he offered only a sly one-liner. "We've had some spicy conversations lately. Some guests prefer exits to answers." The audience laughed, of course, but that laugh came with a weight, because everyone watching knew it was a reference to the moment, the one that everyone was still talking about. And the public? Oh, they're still deeply divided. Some argue that Karoline's walkout is a clear sign of what's broken in American media, a culture of gotcha interviews and partisan jabs disguised as comedy. Others believe she failed a basic test, to sit, stay, and engage even when the heat turns up. But beyond the arguments and headlines, the deeper issue remains. Are we still capable of having difficult conversations across political lines? Or have we lost that ability completely? Because here's the thing, this wasn't just a walk-off. This was a mirror reflecting back the tensions we're all feeling. In many ways, Karoline versus Colbert became symbolic of something much larger than a single TV segment. It was about young conservative voices pushing into traditionally liberal spaces, and what happens when they do. It was about the role of late-night TV. Is it comedy, journalism, activism? And most of all, it was about whether our public spaces still allow genuine debate or whether every conversation has to end in a mic drop or a walkout. Political commentators from both sides weighed in. Some warned that moments like this make it even harder for Americans to understand one another. "If we can't talk without storming out or shouting down," one journalist wrote, "we're not going to fix anything." Others saw it differently. "Sometimes," said a conservative commentator, "walking away is exactly what you need to do when the deck is stacked against you." There's no denying it. Karoline Leavitt is now firmly on the national radar. Whether this moment boosts her future in politics or burns bridges in media circles remains to be seen. But what's clear is that she made an unforgettable impression. On that stage, on the audience, and on millions of viewers who are still debating what really happened. She walked into a space where she knew she might be challenged. She took a stand when she felt the conversation crossed a line, and she left, on her own terms. Some say that's bravery, others say it's deflection, but either way, it's a move people won't forget. And as for Colbert, his show continues, his fans stand by him, and his brand of comedy meets critique lives on. But even he has to know, this wasn't your average political guest. This wasn't a comedy bit that faded in 5 minutes. This was a cultural moment. 1. That raises some powerful questions. Are we still willing to hear from people we disagree with? Is there space for real debate in our public discourse? Or are we now living in a time where disagreement automatically equals disrespect? Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. What's certain is that this moment between Karoline Leavitt and Stephen Colbert was never just about one interview. It was about what happens when America's political fault lines are exposed on live TV, and no one flinches. No matter what side you're on, you've got to admit, it made you stop, watch, and think. And that's the power and the danger of a walkout that said more than words ever could. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment like this.